take cool shots like this one. So do you like this type of macro shots or up close shots where you show your just a little bit of the detail of your images? So you do like to take this type of pictures? So do you enjoy taking this type of videos where the focus pans out slowly and smoothly throughout the object? Do you have little money to spend on these type of shots? Well, worry not, because I have a solution for you, and this is kind of one of my favorite topics lately. I have having a craving about these up close shots, and well, can kind of call it a macro shot in a way. So if you do enjoy to see this type of detailed photography or this type of kind of very epic images about a product, and you want to know how to take them, just follow along. So if you want to know how to do this in a tight budget, which is usually my budget, it's almost always tight. So how can you do this type of shots? Well, you can go and try to buy a dedicated lens. You can search for that on eBay, Amazon, and all of those sources. And you can find some dedicated lenses, well, for that purpose. But if you look for those lenses, maybe they are way out of your budget, which is usually my case. Usually, those lenses are, and some other cases are out of my budget. I was kind of planning making this shoot outside today, but sadly it's raining cats and dogs, so inside it is. So what do you need to make and take micro shots on a budget? Well, the first thing you need to have, it's a camera. Okay, you probably already have one. I'm sharing with you guys my Canon EOS 550D. You can use any, in this case I'm using a Canon camera, but you can use any camera really. This is an APS-C camera. You can use a Micro Four Thirds like the one I'm filming right now. It really doesn't matter that much. The technique works on all cameras. So you need a camera. My 550D will suffice. You can use any camera, full frame, APS-C, Micro Four Thirds, you name it. Afterwards, you kind of need a lens. Okay, so a lens. You can use either a more recent lens like this one here, my trustworthy and always working Canon 50mm 1.8, the Plastic Fantastic. This will work fine. Or, which is my preferred preference, but you can shoot with whatever lens combination you have. You can use old school manual everything lens. Okay, so there are advantages of using one or the other. I do prefer to use the old school lenses because I have lots of them lying around for my film cameras, and they offer control. What do I mean by control? Do you see this here, the aperture control? So these old lenses allow me to do the aperture control manually at my liking, and also usually they have a big and smooth and very effective, and in this case a very long throw focusing ring, so allows me to fine control my focus, which in micro photography and macro filmmaking kind of are important to have that type of control. So I prefer the method of using an old school lens because I have tons, and see, I can control the aperture by hand without the need of using any electronic operations on my camera. And also the focus, it's very smooth and easy to operate. Okay, but I'll show you how can you use a old school film camera and a more modern digital. You can use this with also film, but a more modern lens. That's what I want to say. So we have two options to do macro photography on the budget. So I'll just say option number one and option number two, just to make a difference. They don't have any order of preference, but I'm going to share with you guys what is my preferred method. Let's start with option number one, which is this type of adapter ring. Okay, so this adapter ring allows me to, well, in this case it's for a Canon camera. So you just pick up your ring and you attach the ring, and like any other kind of lens, you just get the red dot here and you attach the ring there. But this ring has the one interesting option, which is allows me to mount, instead of mounting my lens the correct way, allows me to mount the lens inverted. So we can screw the lens invertedly, which means that the part that usually it's pointing to the sensor, it's now pointing to the opposite side. So some guys someday just thought, what if I mount this invertedly and see what happens? And the effect is then you can do some macro shots with the lens inverted, which is kind of crazy. The only thing that you probably have problems with is how to control your aperture. As you can see, my lens, it's off the camera, and you can see there the aperture is closed down a little bit and it's disconnected from the camera. This is kind of crazy, right? So I'll show you a trick. Okay, how can you mount a more modern camera, a more modern lens, and keep the iris closed down a little bit when the lens is disconnected from the camera? Because if you are mounting an inverted lens with this adapter, since the lens is inverted, this part is facing the camera, right? So it means that the camera cannot control electronically with these pins here the lens. So on these modern lenses, the aperture control is done by the camera itself. So the camera needs to send electrical signals to the lens so we can open and close the iris of your lens. But since the lens is mounted invertedly, the electronic bits are not in contact with the camera. See? So how can we control the iris? Because if the lens is mounted as usual, I just mount it, power the camera on, and now on the regular controls, I can say, let's say, wide open. Okay, now the lens is wide open. So if I power off my camera and remove the lens, as you can see, the iris is wide open. See there? It's wide open. Now I'm going to power on my camera with the lens attached, and I'm going to set the aperture to, I don't know, f9. Okay, I'll show this off camera, but f9. Okay, now I power off my camera, remove my lens, still wide open. Okay, so that's one thing you need to be careful of. If you're going to invert your lens, it's going to be always wide open, because that's how it works. But the trick is, so the trick to keep an electronic lens, so if you want to close the iris with the lens out of the camera, it's quite simple. This works in all Canon cameras I tested it with. I don't know if other brands work, but I don't see why not. So just power on the camera. Okay. You set your aperture to the value desired. In this case, it's f9. Okay. But now you're going to press the depth of field preview. See there? It's actually closing down the lens to the desired aperture. So if I put this to f6.3, see? The depth of field preview button is going to close down the lens. So I'm going to put this to f4, let's say. Now, but as soon as I let go the button, the lens goes back to wide open. That's just how it works. Now, I'm just going to keep the button pressed down, and I'm going to power off my machine, and you can see it's back to wide open. Okay? So the trick is you press the depth of field preview, and then you remove your lens. Jesus, I know it's kind of a scary stuff, but it works, and I haven't had any issues. So let's do this again. So you attach the lens to the camera, and it's wide open, because electronic lenses with modern cameras keep the iris wide open to help on the focus. Now you set your aperture. In this case, I'm at f4. Click the depth of field preview button. Keep your camera powered on. If you power it off, it will go back to wide open. And you press the lens release. bang. And the lens, it's now with the iris closed down to the desired aperture. The only downside of this process is then you have to put the lens back on the camera and reset the iris to whatever aperture you want every time you need to change the aperture of your camera, of your lens, I'm sorry. So now you just put your adapter ring and you screw your lens inverted. Now this can give you some decent macro shots, and then obviously in this case, since once again the lens is inverted, the electronical bits are not in contact with the camera, you will need to manually focus using this ring. So this works great with modern lenses inverted. You do the trick to keep the iris down and you have your aperture and you can do your macro shots. However, this is not my preferred way, okay? My preferred way is to purchase what we call the macro extension rings, which is just this metallic thingies. They don't have any electronic bits attached, nothing of sorts. They are just metallic. And what is the effect of these rings? Well, you simply attach the rings like any other lens, okay? Then you mount your lens here. So let's say I'm going to use my modern lens. So this has a standard EOS mount. And now the effect is the lens, it's mounted further away from the sensor. And technically this is providing you better magnification and the capability of focusing closer to the subject, okay? So without going too much into much details about this, simply put, the macro capability gives you better magnification, so the objects appear to be bigger, and it allows you to focus closer to the object, so you can actually get it nice and close and tight to the subject, okay? So I'm using here, in this example, the previous lens I used to stop down. So as you can see, it's kind of hard to see now, but if I remove the lens, you can see it's still stopped down, using the technique I just showed you. And then I just mount this as usual. I frame and I manually focus using the manual focus ring. But however, I do prefer to use something more vintagey like this manual focus lens. So I'm using this is an M42 screw mount lens, and I'm using the M32 to Canon adapter. I just screw in like a regular lens. Okay, now my lens is attached, but why do I prefer this method? Because I have manual control on the iris here, see? You can actually see it quite good, see? Without the need of that trick, and I have manual focus on a lens that was made to manually be focused at. So I can have this smooth operation of the focus ring, which I don't have on this one. This one has a really small ring. And this one is really smooth because it was made for this purpose. And I have my aperture control. So without going into much detail on microphotography, on the techniques, usually the wider you shoot, like f2 right now, you have a really shallow depth of field, which gives you that you need to be very, if you are hand holding, you need to be very careful to where you're going to focus, because your focus depth is really shallow, so you get that sliver of focus, which can be what you want. However, if you go something like f2.8, f4, f5.6, SS, the smaller the aperture, the more in focus you are, more area in focus you have, but then you're going to have less light, which means either you need to put some flash on it, or slow down or shutter speed. So be careful that if you close down your lens, you have more in focus, but less light comes in, so you need to either bump your ISO, slow down your shutter speed, or blast light onto the subject, okay? Another downside of using this technique, using this process, is that since all of this is metal, there are no contacts, which means even if I use a modern lens mounted properly, there are no contacts between the electrical parts of the lens and the electrical parts of the camera, which means if I set my lens to f5, f6 or f11, they are always on that state. So which means less lights coming through, which makes focusing a little bit harder. However, if you are out and about or you are in the studio, you put your camera on a tripod, focus wide open, then you just close down and you take your shot. Okay, so that's not a big deal. The other thing that these focus rings have is that you can screw them out. So they are screwable, which means that I can just, for example, put this ring on. They are numbered, so you know which ones are which. So we can screw this one here. Then put this one in the end. So the longer the tubes are, closer you can get and bigger magnification you get. So fool around with the amount of rings you want to have. So this is the max I can get in this specific kit. So the longer the tubes are screwed in, closer you can get, bigger magnification you can get too. So you need to experiment with your subjects and what you are photographing or filming, and what type of magnification you need, and you can get your micro shots as needed. So this is really cheap. This will throw you back a couple of bucks. The rings is also really cheap. This is going to throw you back a couple of bucks too. So this is my preferred method. The micro tubes that you can screw on, and using a vintage lens that allows you to more easily control your aperture and your focus. So you just mount this on your camera. In this case, I'm using my trustworthy Never Fail Me 550D, and you just mount your lens like any other lens. In this case, it's a Canon system, but you can use pretty much any system. This is the maximum magnification I can get using most of my rings. However, one thing to note is that the actual focus distance of the lens you are using makes an impact. So in this case, I'm using a 58mm. This was a 50mm. If you go telephoto or wider, you're going to have different results on your micro shots. So the best way to do is to experiment with the lenses you have available. I usually tend to go to the 50mm, 85mm for most of my work, micro, portraiture, whatever. I want to go wider when I go do some street, but that's another subject. So the actual focus distance of your lens actually matters on your final result. Usually I use a 58, 85, 50, around about there, but you should the better way is to experiment. Get your hands on some extension tubes or on a virtual ring. I do prefer the extension tubes, and experiment to whatever vintage lens you have. If you don't have a vintage lens, use a modern lens and do the trick I showed you to keep your aperture closed down and focus by hand, and you also should be good to go. I always prefer take the shot, do not take the shot, and this gives me very good results, and I have lots of fun doing so. Well, I hope you found this informative, and I see you in the next one.